All right, welcome to the Illini Audible Podcast. My name is Say Bravo. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the pod. As always, I really appreciate it. And I know it's been a while since I did one of these. So excuse me for that. But today, we make it worth it because today I'm alongside Cooper O'Kelly, my colleague at the Champagne Room. It's almost like a face reveal. It's almost like we've been working together the entire semester and we haven't collaborated on anything of significance. So I'm happy to welcome Cooper O'Kelly. Cooper, how are you doing this morning?
I'm good, dude. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Cooper, we were just talking about this radio. We love it. Podcasting, we love it. So let's get right into everything that we have to talk about regarding this Illinois football team and regarding the fact that they are going to a bowl game, the Music City Bowl. They're going to face Tennessee. What was your immediate thought when you got the news, you got the email, you got the press release about this team going to that bowl game?
Yeah, I mean, I was excited. Obviously, Nashville is the spot that's close enough where a lot of Illini fans are going to be able to travel there. I'm sure that, you know, this fan base, which is so passionate and has such a love for Illini athletics, is going to be able to like show up in droves, represent the school, represent the team. And then, playing against Tennessee, like that's a pretty historic football program. Obviously, one of the better teams over the past couple of years in the SEC. And I don't know. I was really excited personally. I know a lot of people might have, I guess, been let down over, preseason expectations or whatnot. But all things considered, I think this is a really good spot.
I think overall, Illinois fans and Illini fans, I think the consensus is that yeah, while the season wasn't exactly what we all expected, and I've talked about this over the course of the last couple months, just specifically right after the Ohio State game is pretty much when even though Illinois did really, I thought was, and they did. The numbers will say that they competed pretty well against a team of that caliber. That was Ohio State. That game was really good. I thought Illinois competed and they put up the most points, I believe, against Ohio State for an Ohio State opponent. An offense did, and I'm getting sidetracked. But my point is that I think a lot of Illinois fans, despite the preseason expectation, are excited and rightfully should be for another bowl game. It is a big deal. 3 years or 3 of the last 4 years, Illinois has gotten a bowl game when previously, and I know this is before our time, Illinois would be pretty much a stranger to that, to the idea of Illinois even having any postseason play. And it is a positive thing. I think it is also a big deal because you get more practices in with your current squad. I know that the transfer portal is going to impact a bunch of stuff that we're not going to be able to foresee that stuff for sure, but the practices are valuable. So I do think that there's a lot to it that is more than just, oh, they made a bowl game. There's a little bit of disappointment. Both things can be true. I think Illinois fans can be, reaching, can be aspiring, can be hopeful for the future. And the idea that this program could aspire for so much higher. But you can also be happy with this result that you got this year. The idea that this team is going to a bowl game. So it's a really interesting dynamic, I feel like.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And you kind of mentioned how extra practice kind of factors into these bowl games. I think a big part of that is you're going to see whether it's the transfer portal or guys being advised by their agents not to play in the bowl game. That's going to give some of these younger players on the Illini and teams across the country an opportunity to kind of get some tape out there and show like why they might deserve to have bigger roles in coming seasons, which is something I'm really excited for.
No question. And I think the guy I point to, the reason I point to him is because I extensively covered what his season was over the course of this season. But it's a prime position for some player who's a freshman on that roster, maybe a sophomore on that roster, who is coming back and can solidify himself as a dude who's going to be a prime guy next season, a guy that's going to come on the rise next season. And the guy I point to is Angelo McCullum. because the nose tackle, last year he was a freshman, sat behind T. Raw Edwards the entire season. They developed really good rapport. They were really good friends from the same hometown, I believe. And they ended up, and you saw the work came into fruition. He got a couple snaps in the bowl game, the Orange Bowl, and you saw what happened this season, his development and his growth. It's going to be something that is going to be signifies something. And you saw that last year, I think, too, with Hank Beatty, a guy that, wasn't the wide receiver one last year. And then suddenly he came in 2025, burst from the scene. And I think I said that right. And he ended up being wide receiver one the entire season, had a really good season. So it's really an opportunity. But both things can be true. Like I said, you can be disappointed and you can be optimistic about both of these. This can mean both, is my point.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you on that. I mean, in terms of like the bowl itself, I feel like the main storyline that you're hearing a lot about is kind of how Tennessee was that main team that was trying to convince Luke to come and play for them, try and enter the transfer portal. So I really hope that Luke ends up suiting up just so we can kind of see that storyline play out.
The way of the land is, I think I've heard that Luke might actually end up playing that. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. It'd be cool if that did, but I think the alternative is Ethan Hampton. And honestly, so I didn't realize this, and I think we were talking about this in a group chat, right? Ethan Hampton is a junior, and he's primed to come back to this Illinois program, which I think is a little weird because this is a guy I'm pretty certain he was a senior. Something must have happened. I'm not sure, but the quarterback play is definitely going to be a storyline because obviously it's going to be a crapshoot for next year, right? Like we don't know who's going to be the quarterback. They see what it sounds like is that it's going to be Ethan Hampton because he's, I guess, a junior. He's going to enter his final year of eligibility. But the greater point is that I'm not sure. I mean, we'll see what the quarterback position looks like for next season. And yeah, does the storyline of Luke Altmyer possibly playing against Tennessee and being that guy who suits up for the team or against the team that was one of the suitors in the offseason, I think is a pretty gratifying storyline.
Yeah, definitely. And just a little bit on that Ethan Hampton stuff.
Yeah.
Like 100%, we looked into things that I am very confident that he was listed as a senior to start the season. And I don't know why they would intentionally do that and like hide maybe that he has a year of eligibility. Maybe he was just granted it by the NCAA or something and it was kept under wraps. But that kind of explains a lot of things where, at least for me, when Ethan Hampton entered the transfer portal, like, he was a part of that Northern Illinois team that beat Notre Dame during the regular season last year. In my eyes, I'm like, why would he want to come here if he knows he's not going to start in his last year of college football?
No question.
Right. And it didn't make sense. So if this was the plan all along for him to kind of sit behind Luke and then get his opportunity at a starting spot the following year, that answers a lot of questions for me in terms of why he would come to Illinois and what the general plan was.
I think a factor in this whole equation is, of course, the money, the Big Ten money that you do get when you transfer into a program of Illinois' caliber. And we've covered it extensively. Illinois is a program that's not poor. In 2025, in the era of NIL and what's going to be revenue sharing in a couple years, Illinois is not poor, and they're going to have opportunities to get players like that. But the greater point is that Ethan Hampton, I thought, was a guy that just grabbed the bag, decided to, be a backup for a year, and then, right off the sunset. But it looks like he will get an opportunity. And honestly, I'm pretty excited, right? The idea of a guy who ended up being a quarterback that, with NIU beat a team like Notre Dame and can be a serviceable quarterback in 2026, I think is an optimistic thing because I don't think this is a season or this is an off season where you can 100% get a unless you get another high quality transfer quarterback like Luke Altmaier back in 2023. It's going to be really hard. And fans, we got used to Illinois fans and media alike got used to seeing Luke Altmaier in an Illinois uniform. There should be an expectation that you could see, and it's pretty likely you see a drop off in quality of quarterback play next season. And I know we're no longer talking about, and I think it's okay. We can move on from the bowl stuff and talk about the forecast, the future for Illinois, or at least speculate about it. It's going to be tough. Like I do think Ethan Hampton is a serviceable quarterback, and I think he'll play pretty well next season. But it'll be interesting the way things unfold, because I don't think that you're going to end up just having another quarterback that you can just pop in and it's going to be the exact same thing. We have to remember Luke Altmaier is an outlier. Luke Altmaier is a historic Illinois quarterback, and it's going to be a thing where we should see a drop off in production in quarterback play.
Yeah, and it's always going to be a difference when you go from a guy that's consistently in talks of like being one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten to, anybody else really. To me, what this kind of seems like is it seems like the staff, the offensive coordinators, Bielema himself seem to be really high on Michael Clayton. So to
Yeah.
me, it kind of seems like maybe you use Hampton as kind of a stopgap for a year, get Clayton some more reps, maybe throw him out there as a redshirt freshman in 2027. I'm not entirely sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of the direction they're going in.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you, because I think Illinois fans alike can deal with a year of Ethan Hampton, and I like I said, I think he will be a serviceable quarterback. I don't have any really doubts about that. And the most important thing in quarterback play is always reps. He has that. Obviously, he hadn't had reps in 2025 because was a backup quarterback for Luke Altmaier, who never got injured. But the outlying factor is that he has significant reps in college football. It's an important thing, and that dovetails with what Michael Clayton is. Doesn't have reps. It's we all understand the transition from high school quarterbacking to college quarterbacking, and obviously NFL quarterbacking, almost a totally different sport. We'll not get into that. Anyways, I do agree with you, and I will say this too, because obviously it's a quarterback room that they have significant quarterbacks in there. Carson Boyd, a guy who was a freshman this season, I think he'll remain out of the loop, because so for a little bit of context, because Cooper, I don't think you were there. The bye week practice that we got a look at, that I know that he doesn't have that many reps. Carson Boyd does, but there were a couple red flags that you could diagnose, because this was a quarterback that was struggling, and he was with the third team. But I can tell you there were a lot of murder balls thrown. It just didn't look good. Obviously, both things can be true. It might have been a bad practice. He's still a guy they're high on, or they feel good about, but it's obviously telling when they get another quarterback the next year, which is Michael Clayton. And, actions speak louder than words is my point.
Yeah, and in terms of Boyd, like you would think that this upcoming year would probably be his kind of time to shine if you followed like the typical QB progression of typical college programs. But like you said, I mean, with Hampton being able to kind of step in, and I do agree that he'll be serviceable. He will be like a solid. I don't want to use the word game manager because like that kind of frustrates me, but like that's exactly what he could kind of do. Be like that, like Alex Smith caliber of quarterback, where like he is totally capable of running the offense and makes the throws that you need him to make. I just think that if they were confident in Boyd's ability to one day be the starting quarterback of this Illinois team, they'd probably do it sooner rather than later, just so they know what kind of talent they have.
No question. And on Hampton's 1 year as a backup, I mean, a year inside the system is already an advantage. A year, assuming that Barry Lunny does come back. And again, the way of the land, it sounds like he will be. It feels like he will be. But a year in the system is encouraging to see from a guy who, was a backup. And I will quote, and I know that I don't mean to make so much out of this one bye week practice, but a quote that I did write down was, "Carson, you're fucking it up." I remember that very vividly. And there are obviously, as we've talked about, there are significant learning curves for quarterbacks coming from high school to the NFL, or excuse me, to college football. So that is something to monitor as well. But anyways, another factor inside of this bowl game is the wide receiver play, because we understand that Hank Beatty is out of eligibility, and there's going to be a shakeup in that wide receiver room, and part of the offense is going to be replacing that wide receiver production. A guy that I look at and I'm excited about is Braden Trimble, as a guy who didn't play this season, but made a lot of noise over the course of the spring practices and had some pretty insane catches throughout those practices, and seems to be a guy who can be poised to be a really good wide receiver in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Well, first, do you think Beatty's going to play in this game?
That's tough, because I do think that if I'm him, I want to get drafted, and I'm not sure if he would. I don't think he will. It depends. But Illinois fans would be happy to have him play. If I were him and I understood that I couldn't, or that there is even a slight chance that I get drafted, I probably wouldn't. But if he's not going to, or depending on what happens, why not?
Yeah, I think he will play. He kind of seems like the type of guy that would play. I mean, you
Yeah.
look back last year, Franklin played in the bowl game last year, right?
I think he did. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he's kind of on that same level
Yeah.
of like how much I think NFL scouts are really looking into them. Like I'm very confident he'll get a training camp nod for sure. But yeah, obviously great season for Beatty. I agree with you. It's kind of like what we entered this season kind of thinking, right? You lose Pat Bryant, you lose Franklin, and you that wide receiver room like was in search of kind of that alpha guy, that number one receiver, the go-to option. And Hank did great in stepping up in that role. And when you think of like that alpha wide receiver one, you don't always think of a guy that plays like Hank Beatty, but it worked, obviously. Like
Yeah.
they had a great connection all season long. Obviously all Big Ten third team as a receiver, I'm pretty sure. So he had a great season. And you mentioned Trimble. I'm excited to see freshmen like that kind of get their shot. Maybe it's during the bowl game. Maybe it's more reps during the spring. Who knows? But in terms of this wide receiver room in general, I think there's a lot of talent returning that to be excited about. Like I'm excited for Hudson Clement. Really came on strong at the end of the season.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be back next year. I don't know. Looking into him, I think I'm really excited to see how he's going to continue to thrive in this Illinois offense. Because, like I said, like his last 4 games over the season
Yeah.
were really great. And you have another year of Justin Bowick. You have another year of Colin Dixon, I think.
I think Colin Dixon is out of eligibility, but the broader point remains. I do agree with you. Hudson Clement does have 2 years of eligibility left. Or I think that was when he transferred, he did. So he will have at least a year of eligibility. And I agree with you. I think that you're gonna be pretty set on that wide receiver room, because a guy like Hudson Clement that really did, like you mentioned, come on over the last couple of games in the college football season. And I'm, as a guy who covered his kind of early part of the season really extensively, I'm really fascinated by Justin Bowick, because as the season progressed, you saw him be featured in the offense less. And but this is a guy who had 4 touchdowns in, I believe, the first 3 games of the college football season. That's no joke. This is a guy that they want to target in the red zone. That Barry Lunny wants to feature him heavily in the red zone. The body of work, just the physical acumen that he is, it's pretty insane. You look at him. This guy's huge, and so my broader point is that I'm excited to see him develop, assuming that he stays in another season with Illinois, because as a guy who got significantly less reps in the red zone, or less targets in the red zone as the course of over the course of the season, I do think they have faith in him. I just think that there are significant, learning curves for a guy who was a wide receiver in the mid majors coming up to the Big Ten, and I'm excited for his development in year 2 if he does. Again, this is all contingent on everybody coming back, and it's just the way of the land. But it's just kind of how this operates.
Yeah, and that's weird in and of itself, right? Because you look back even like 5 years ago, you're like, this guy had 4 touchdowns in 3 games to start the season. Like, why would there be any sort of inclination why he'd be leaving? But you do mention like his production did fall off towards the end of the season. So in terms of the transfer portal, like it might even be the easier way out for him to just be like, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna go somewhere else.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know. I'm not sure if he's going to do that, but I agree in that it will be interesting to kind of follow and keep tabs on.
Yeah, and I think I kind of want to take a step back now and chat a little bit about I know we kind of did this in a wonky way, but just the overall kind of level of satisfaction, or level of, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but in terms of this past season that we covered, you and me, we were in Wisconsin for that awful loss. Me and Andrew, we were at Purdue for that awful defensive performance, even though they won. We were at almost every game. What did you make of the regular season 2025 and everything that it was, with all its
Yeah,
turbulence?
yeah. Before, you didn't even mention the worst game that all of us were at out in Bloomington. That
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
shell shocking.
Yes. No question.
Yeah, but I mean, all things considered, right? I think this is a successful season, and this is kind of on par with what you can expect over the next couple of years with Illinois as a program. Like, you're going to consistently be in that 8-win range, with maybe have an outlier season where you go and win 10 games.
Yeah.
Right. I think this is about what Illinois fans should be expecting. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right. I feel like in this era where the college football playoff has, a lot of ramifications and impact on the landscape of the sport, which it should. I mean, you want to get into that tournament and compete for a national title. But I think a part of that is it kind of makes bowl games seem less important or less special. But for Illinois, getting in a consistently high bowl game, like that's something to be proud of, right? They're still
Yeah.
fighting for a back-to-back 9-win season, which I'm pretty sure they hasn't been done in program history, or hasn't been done in 20 years or something like that. Like, I don't know. I've been preaching this all season long that you should be happy if you're an Illinois fan. And I
Yeah.
get any sort of feelings of
Frustration.
letdown. Yeah, frustration, sure. Like, there are games that they dropped, like Wisconsin. That was a game that by no means you should be losing. Like, what Washington, that game sucked because you're still technically in that college football playoff conversation, and you travel out to Seattle and your defense lays an egg, and it's terrible, right? So I get being upset over individual games, and maybe a little bit frustrated or let down that you didn't live up to those preseason Illinois is this year's Indiana, and they're going to sneak into the college football playoff. But if you look at it from like kind of, you take a couple steps back, I think it's a season that you're definitely going to be proud of. You sent out a great group of seniors. Luke Altmaier finished his career with Illinois, and he was a pretty remarkable kind of program altering player for them.
Yeah.
You have a guy in Gabe Akis who is probably going to be a top 100 pick in the NFL draft. Hank Beatty a testament to what things can look like if you stay with Illinois for 4 whole years. I think it was a good season.
Yeah, no question. And I think both things can be true, right? Like you and me are on opposite ends of this conversation because I know that I'm very loud in these group chats with you guys, but I did the expectation was high and the bar should be high. There's no question to me that is. I mean, you look at the money, you look at even the money that was infused this year by Larry Geese, who into the football program. I know most of that money is for the facilities, but it's money for football. There is yes, there's no question that I think Indiana has skewed everybody's college football expectations because you're like fans can be like, hey, why aren't we go? It's an outlier. Indiana is 100% an outlier, but I do think that both things can be true. Fans can be satisfied with a season that was a little underwhelming, but the biggest frustration for me was the fact that you didn't just lose these 4 games. You got destroyed in these games. The Wisconsin game was a total shellacking. Obviously, we talked about Indiana. Washington, defense didn't show up. And the fourth one, Ohio State, which I think was probably the fairest loss of the season. I think, ironically, that to me, that was the moment that I understood what this Illinois football team was. But that was 100% the best loss of the season. My broader point being, I think they came below expectation, but you can be satisfied as a fan because 8-4 is something that doesn't really happen here too much. And you should be happy with the fact that this program has come so far in 5 seasons under Bret Bielema. But you should also, in the future, have the expectation that you should aspire for greater wins and achieving further greatness because you squandered an opportunity of national attention in 2025. You don't know when that's coming back. You don't know when you're going to have another star quarterback inside of your locker room. You don't know when you're going to have another star pass rusher inside of your locker room. You don't know. But I will say, with that all being said, I do think that there's a lot of stability here. There's a lot of stability inside of this program because of Bielema. And there's another factor is that, I mean, this offseason, or excuse me, the conclusion of this season, a top 21 ranked recruiting class in the country. That's a big deal. And Illinois fans should be optimistic for the future while also clamoring for greater aspirations. I think both things can be true.
Yeah, and we have talked about it, I guess, and not on this podcast. Obviously, this is my first time here, but just kind of looking at all the guys that are leaving, like you look at that offensive line, for example, and they're going to be pretty much decimated, not starting from scratch, but a lot of those starters are like 5th-year senior type players that are out of eligibility. So you're going to have new guys in position groups like that are really important. But having a freshman class like that, like Bielema has been on record saying multiple times, like he thinks there's going to be guys coming out of this class that are going to step up and start day one. So like having that kind of boost to have such a talented class really, keeps your kind of momentum going and make sure that you don't take too much of a hit for trying to take a year off and develop guys into being good for the following season. I don't know. The part of what you just said that stands out to me is like, you're right. It sucks that that was the last year that you have with Luke, right? Yeah. And he is a great quarterback. He is a quarterback that is fully capable of playing in a college football playoff game and like keeping you in it, giving you a chance to win. So it sucks that they didn't get that opportunity to kind of make it all the way to that tournament. I don't know. The biggest thing I feel like is that was your best shot, right? At least over the past couple of years. Like, I'm not saying that you're not going to see Illinois ever making it to the playoff because they will get there eventually, but that definitely was your best shot, which is unfortunate.
I do agree. one thing I do also want to touch on is obviously we the noise outside of the Smith Center was always the attention of scrutiny was always on the defensive coordinator. And I've come to realize, and I remember this very vividly, and I remember the moment that I sat and I was sitting, it just dawned, it just came on me, like it dawned upon me that I don't Aaron Henry is going to have another shot at this defensive coordinator position, and I I I know fans are going to be disappointed. I know fans are going to want results, but there are two things that dawned on me the other day. I think Bielema is a loyal guy. We all know this. I mean, you see the way he tears up for his guys in post game pressers. I mean, this is a very emotional guy. I think Aaron Henry is going to come back, and I think pretty for certain because I feel pretty certain of that because one, I do think there's an emotional attachment to him, and we do know that Bielema was a guy when he first got his defensive coordinator position, a guy that also struggled. I think the more you relate, the more you end up favoring the guy. But then also you have to understand how valuable Aaron Henry is for Florida recruiting. He is incredibly valuable because first of all, Florida recruiting, just having that state and have consistently competing in that state, Aaron Henry is the guy for that. But not only that, we also understand that Florida, I mean, kids over there are not, I'm sorry to everybody in the United States, but Florida kids, the the way they compete for football there, it's another level. And we also understand how in the South, it's like high school football is everything. Florida, especially that state, kids are built different there. And it's incredibly valuable to have him as a recruiter for the state of Florida. So I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, I mean, not to play devil's advocate here in favor of Aaron Henry, but in terms of looking at this season, you could kind of see as things played out, like the way the roster was kind of built up, it
Yep.
wasn't meant to sustain losing your number one DB, right? When Xavier Scott went down, that's when everything went to shit. Right, and that seriously, like, for that
Yeah.
defense, when your, what, second best defensive player after Akis goes down and your best player in the secondary, without him, like, you're scrambling to try and piece together a defense that would still be able to compete at a high level, and this team just wasn't they didn't have the depth, right? Like, they weren't ready for that, and I think that obviously, like, there was some fair moments where Henry deserved to get scrutinized, like, that Washington game was just
No question. Yeah.
brutal, but I do think that it's completely reasonable to give him another shot. I don't think that by any means that Bielema's in the wrong for doing so, and I'm not ready to give up. How about that?
No, I agree with you mostly because they were serious flaws. There were serious flaws inside of this roster. I mean, you had a guy in Tanner Heckle almost getting every snap this season. There were moments inside of the season where Tanner Heckle, excuse me, just did not look prepared. And that's no knock on him. And I'm not just trying to point out one guy, but because it was a collective effort that kind of ended up having this defense perform the way that they did. But I do think that there were serious flaws inside of this roster, and those flaws need to be addressed in a hurry this offseason. And I think they will. I think Bielema is a guy that is built to, we talked about the sustainability. I think he has the wherewithal to refine this roster to be better in 2026. I know fans don't want to hear that, but it's a serious thing. And it is just really unfortunate that Xavier Scott went down what was it? Not even a game into the season or like the first game of the season. I forget. But the broader point remains that you lost your almost like pretty certainly one of your best defenders. The biggest issue though with Aaron Henry is the fact that the entire season you had Gabe Akis, who still played really well inside of this season. And it felt like at moments he wasn't put in positions to succeed. I think that goes for a couple other guys too, but Gabe Akis was the main guy where it's like this guy was built for a monster season. You were a little underwhelmed by his production, or excuse me, not his production, because he still was he was the sack leader in the Big Ten, right? I think so. And but regardless, this is a guy who was I don't know. Maybe I'm using this term too lightly. A once in a lifetime recruit, once in a lifetime guy. But you were happy that you had him back this year, and I felt like in moments we didn't see him shine too much. And that was my biggest gripe with the defensive production in 2025, and I think a lot of that does go to Aaron Henry. But hey, give him credit; he's good at chatting, man. I mean, you ever been to one of his pressers? It's a spectacle.
Yeah, in line with what you're saying about Akis, like I don't think once in a lifetime for Illinois is too much of a stretch at all. This guy was a preseason All-American, I think, by ESPN. And having that as an edge rusher is a huge deal. And I agree with you. Obviously, like he did lead the Big Ten in sacks. He was the regular season sack leader. Want to say all Big Ten first team as well. So obviously, like there was success, but I do agree where on a game-to-game basis, like in terms of the stat sheet, he was minimized in a couple of games where you're kind of looking at it and you're like, what is going on here? Like this guy is supposed to be flying after a quarterback in every game. And, there should be ways for things to get done up schematically on defense where he has an opportunity to get pressures or hits or something like that. And it didn't happen in every single game.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that part for sure.
And that was further magnified when in those huge losses that we've documented, right? Like that was every time that Illinois' defense had a bad performance, he was the person who talked to the media afterwards. And I mean, this is a great. I mean, Gabe Akis is just a leader, man. Like he's one of my favorite guys to talk to throughout the course of the season. I mean, just a really hell of a guy, and always took the responsibility, even though at times it wasn't his fault. It wasn't necessarily his fault. But the further point remains that you were a little underwhelmed, but sustainability is an outlying theme, and if you do have, I mean, think about it. Bielema enters his sixth season. If you keep Barry Lunny, you keep Aaron Henry. I mean, that's sustainability. That's you're at a minimum, you should be having the same expectations for next season of 8-4, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean that seems like it's going to be the standard. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that,
No.
right? I mean, especially like being able to retain a guy like Barry Lunny, like in like a coaching carousel that got pretty crazy,
Yeah.
this season, and obviously got a little bit more crazy yesterday with Sherrone Moore. But I don't know, being able to keep him even through that, I think is an encouraging sign. He's a guy that at some point like is going to get a shot at running a team. I'm pretty confident in that. But just being able to continue to build up that offense with him for the time being, like that's super important. And I think that's going to set your team up for success, even if like this roster for next year isn't going to get the type of national attention that this year's roster did. But
Yeah.
I don't see any reason why they're not going to be able to continue to compete. And we don't even know which transfers are even going to be coming in yet. So that's another thing to kind of keep tabs on for sure.
There's no question. There's no question. And there'll be a further time to chat more about this in the future. And I'm sure we will once the dust is settled and every possible shift happens. Hell, there could be news later today. We have no idea. But the broader point remains that, for Barry Lunny, I mean, who better to learn from than Bielema and wait for the right opportunity, kind of a thing that coaches more often than not should do, but tend to just take the first opportunity they get, and then end up regretting it or end up getting fired. So Lunny strikes me as a guy who's playing his cards close to the vest, is for sure, for certain. And you have a defensive coordinator who's going into his fourth season as a defensive coordinator, and there's just sustainability. But with that being said, I think that was a lot that we just chatted about, Cooper. So I understand that it is a special person's birthday today, Cooper.
Yeah, going home for my mom's birthday today. Looking forward to a nice dinner at home. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice, man. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you for coming on. I'm hopeful that we get to do this again. So yeah, I know you're a big radio guy, and I love radio. We've talked about this a lot. But all right. Subscribe, rate, review if you so please. Whatever. Yeah. So peace.